Om Agyanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So Prabhupada ki jai, Shishi Vaishnava Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Can you see our screen? Biplava Education, ISKCON Ministry of Education.
Yes, Maharaj, we can see it.
Okay. So, of course, this is the Biplava, announce our conquest, our very means of conquest, education. And ISKCON Ministry of Education Global Symposium 2021. I have an extra one there. Okay. August 12th to 15th, as far as I understand. And our topic was goal of education. And of course, we are Hanuman Parishakshwana. And our own particular institution within ISKCON is the Anjana Sudha Academy. Our webpage address is there, www.jayarama.us. And our GBC secretary is Virbahu Prabhu. So here we have, of course, this very, very beautiful BBT picture of Prahlad Maharaj giving education. And all the aspects are very interesting because we're looking at a clandestine education, we're looking at young people, and they're all children of demons. So there are many, many different aspects of education are presented in this picture. Okay. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take. Please tell me when you can see the next slide.
It's visible now, Maharaj. You can assume that it will come up, the technology is properly set up. We will only interrupt you or mention if something is not visible. So you can assume it's going on.
Okay. I assume that today everybody told me it was taking 2-3 seconds. So I assume you see the next slide, which is Srimad Bhagavatam 762. So with everybody, we can all chant together here. You with your microphones closed. Yatahi Purushasyeha Vishnu Pado Pasarpanam Yadesha Sarvabhutanam Priya Atmeshvara Suhrit. And this is Prahlad Maharaj's instructions to his demoniac students, classmates. And in the purport, Prabhupada extracts the essence here and saying, our eternal relationship with God can be revived in the human form of life. And that should be the goal of education. Indeed, that is the perfection of life and the perfection of education. And of course, sometimes we get caught up in the details of learning Varna Ashram relationships. And as Prabhupada was saying, we're learning Shilpa, livelihood, and all these other aspects, mathematics, arithmetic, reading, so on. But the real thing is how we're progressing through these stages. On the right-hand side, of course, we have this famous list. Ado Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishda, Ruchis, Asaktis, Bhava, Prema. And of course, this is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1:4, 15 through 16. And it's in the purport to Bhagavad Gita 4:10, right there, accessible. So it's not something that we just kind of keep in the sky or anything else, but it should be very, very, very practical in the foreground of our own investigation, development in Krishna consciousness. We see it as a verse that Prabhupada paraphrases and cites again and again. Upadeshamrita, which constitutes first instructions for neophyte devotees, and therefore remains the basis for all other study. Prabhupada paraphrases it, and he goes through nicely, describing the different levels. So Prabhupada's saying we must know, for Madhyamadakari, we must know the level of spiritual development of our teachers, our students, and our own classmates. Are they on Kanistha Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari level? And of course, here we see these details It's the same thing, but it's divided into more details. So a very, very practical thing to see the development. And the goal of the school is not to go from the public curriculum in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. These things, more or less in the Varna Ashram system, yes, there should be some education for this. You know, it's going to come quite naturally if we're actually engaged in our spiritual development. You know? But the real question, are we forgetting this, is what is our own level of spiritual development? And what is the level of the spiritual development of others? So, of course, understanding each of these and applying them and talking about them is something which we should know if we're educators, and we should be able to apply in our teaching to other people. Of course, Prabhupada quotes this from Prahlad Maharaj right in the preface to the Bhagavatam. Okay, our next slide here. Okay. So this is the age of Kali. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalo. And the process is Sankirtan, congregational glorification of the Lord, beginning with glorification, amplification, illumination, broadcasting, appreciating His holy names. And then, of course, there's Bhagavata literature in so many forms like that, and taking it out. So how to progress from Adoshrada, Sadhu Sangha, Bharjana Kriya, Nartana Vritti. Basically, it's Sankirtan. The fundamental principle of our education, we're realizing is, we're doing a Light of the Bhagavat symposium for 3 days. We're in Boise, Idaho, where Radhika Raman, everyone is. So we're doing a symposium on Light of the Bhagavat for 3 days. It's being very successful. And we're telling everybody, all the students, all the participants, that we're really here to try and give you this information, insight, motivation, perspective, so that you can teach this. As soon as that attitude is there in the student, if you can communicate that attitude, that we learn to teach, then it becomes Sankirtan. It's not the age of jnana, acquiring knowledge, but it's the age of Sankirtan. So then acquiring knowledge, acquiring systems of thought, like grammar, mathematics, they all can be proportioned in this process of Sankirtan. And we ourselves can advance very nicely at the Shraddha Sadhu Sangha until we're fully awake. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunaya. Fully awake, and then we can be full participants in the Sankirtan party like that. So it also means, even if we're not on the highest level, we can find our place in the Sankirtan movement. That's what we should be teaching people. I'm a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. I'm artisan. I'm basically very, very Brahminical in my activities, but I have some Shudra nature. So I like to do PowerPoint shows. I like to communicate with media, with manual artistic techniques, sensuous techniques. Somebody else, they may realize that they like talking about Krishna, preaching a little bit. But what really satisfies them is organizing presentations where other people, Brahmanas, can present, where artisans can participate and help the Brahmanas communicate. So some Varna Ashram being manifest in terms of our internal development in Sankirtan. And along that line, then, very practically speaking, we go back right to the beginning of our whole basis, Tato Jayam Mudirayat. Let it be announced that the Srimad Bhagavatam is our whole means of education. Prabhupada says that the duty of the spiritual master is to teach Srimad Bhagavatam to his disciples. Chaitanya Charitamrita, we're taking it as a Srimad Bhagavatam course. The Krishna book is the 10th canto. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is an entire summary from the beginning to the end. The basis side, the Bhagavatam is the heart, and everything else is revolving around that. Okay. And what is the very, very first sentence? Sentence. If you look at the preface, which we can look at as a preface to Prabhupada's entire life, his entire mission, is the Bhagavatam. He's the person Bhagavatam. So we printed this preface as a separate little thing, editing a little bit to what is our movement. So Prabhupada starts off, we must know the present need of human society. So the first word is education. Acquiring knowledge is the whole purpose of education. What? We must know what? We must know the present need of human society. If you're on the street, a street book distributor, you're with people for a short time, contacting them one after another, and each one is different. So you develop your technique, right, of knowing what this person needs. Okay, this person's looking for somebody to yell at. It's not me. And so they're screaming about religion or something else like that, and you're keeping the iron smile, and in the end, okay, then a bond is established, and they'll take the brochure, or they'll remember that you're the enemy, and they're looking for you again and again, and eventually that will turn into a positive relationship. Or somebody else is ready to follow you back to the temple and take up Sankirtan themselves. So that's the first proposition of education Prabhupada is presenting. We as Sankirtan people have to know the present need of who we're associating with. And so our movement has to be a very, very alive institution where we're going out in so many ways, approaching so many aspects. So what I would go to next is then a little example of how we're trying to apply this in our own particular life, at the beginning of Krishna consciousness. What is the goal of education? And maybe some of you know, we've kind of ended, we went through Vastu, we went through street book distribution, and we've gone through so many different things, and we're promoting all of them. But what's developed as our own particular modality and perception is especially this dialogue, this trying to build bridges between Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was born in 1875, and Professor C.G. Jung, who was born in 1876. We're doing many other things, interfaith dialogue, science and the Vedas, world classical literature, and they're quite popular. And our mode, of course, is more academic, that environment, symposia, music, and quite successful. So down below in the little box you see here, Prabhupada, at the end of the very, very last, with a discussion with Hayagriva and Shamasundar, the Prabhupada in Dialectical Spiritualism, Prabhupada said, of all of them, he, Carl Jung, seems to have the most common sense. Okay. So we kind of following on this, and this was our own nature. We actually graduated in psychology, first place prize. So trying so many things, we found out this is very natural for us. And so we've been investigating this community and approaching them and talking with them, for a long time. And just 2 weeks ago, finally, with Association of Radhika Ramana, everybody else, we finally had a video call with Shonu Shamdashini, Indian fellow, and he is now one of the deans of the London University, London School, the Department of History of Medicine. And of course, his focus has been Carl Jung from a very, very high perspective from the very beginning. And they have an organization called the Philemon Foundation, which is producing excellent historical, scholarly articles concerned with compassion and the point of religion and everything else is not rejected. That's the investigation. But Jung was not accepting ritual, karma, as religion in itself, and not even jnana, that we understand it. It had to come to the point of artistic, involvement in music, art, like that. And then God as a person remained something for investigation. Well, how far have his followers gone? So this is an example of, for example, like Lord Chaitanya. I think the next slide talks about this. So it took a long time. This is one point. Bhattiswarup Damodar Maharaj told us that Prabhupada said, every single scientist you make a devotee is worth 1,000 ordinary people, but it may take 1,000 times longer to do it. So somebody's making 1,000 devotees, on the street. Somebody's making one devotee after 6 years or something. Yeah. So find your nature. Every salesman has their own technique, Prabhupada says. Understand what is your way of communicating the message. And of course, we did have so much formation and training, which anything we are in this area, so much can be attributed to Bhattiswarup Damodar Maharaj, who fortunately is our sannyas guru, but also Shiksha guru, Astra guru. And within that, we see this mode of, wearing secular dress in so many ways, adjusting to meet their language, their environment. And of course, this comes directly from the tradition of Lord Chaitanya, who sat for 7 days listening to Mayavad philosophy from Sarvabhauma. But when he finally asked him, well, what's your opinion? He said, well, since you asked. And then there was no deviation. It wasn't impolite. But now there could be very straightforward discussion of reason and argument, and with a demonstration of mystical force in the end. So this is one area we're developing and taking this. And to do this, you have to know our culture. You have to know our philosophy. These are people who are not on the gross level. They're very, very subtle in dealing with drug addicts and so many other people. So they can see when you're bluffing very easily and so on. And it's very challenging for us that we know the Bhagavatam, we know the Virat Rup, we know the different levels of consciousness. We know, Sukanya and Chaivana Muni, and all these particular stories we're taking into heart. So as more we go through these levels, the Doshada Sadhusanga with the Bhagavatam, and these stories are starting to take some place in our heart, then we can communicate heart to heart with different people at a very, very iconographic level. And finishing off here, the conclusion was of our first meeting that Professor Samdashini was quite satisfied that we'd done our work. We read the Jungian literature. When Lord Chaitanya was criticizing Shankara, he knows Shankara's Bhashya. And so we know the Jungian environment. Has taken us many years. We can discuss psychology with anybody on the planet at this point. And we've seen that, and they accept, okay, well, what's your idea? You understand our ideas. So he finally recommended what I'm showing you here, Psychology of Yoga and Meditation, which was taken from a series of lectures given by Jung in 1938 and 1940. And these have only very recently been transcribed and published with tremendous devotion to do it. And already we can see so many areas where we can talk to their realization from our perspective, and where we can also gain benefit. So that's our idea. Education means reawakening our relationship with Krishna, finding our place in the Sankirtan movement, and then preaching. And when we bought the book online, it was $21.08, which we consider, Jung would consider I forgot what it's called, something. Krishna's telling us you're on the right path. So that's 18 minutes, and we're finishing here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your association. Please accept our humble obeisances and help us purify our Sankirtan. Hare Krishna.
Hey, Tapaneswar Prabhu, you are muted. Can you unmute?
Thank you, Maharaj. His Holiness Hanumat Prasheka Maharaj has been a guiding force for the Ministry of Education for many, many years. And in many ways, as Maharaj was describing in the context of His Holiness Swarup Damodar Maharaj, I can describe in his context, he's also our Siksha Guru. Hanumat Prisheka Maharaj is our Siksha Guru in terms of guiding us in education. Maharaj continues to serve as an advisor to the ministry and brings in vision and high-level direction in consultation. Maharaj, there's a question from a devotee, Claudia Chandramukhi Devidasi. Her question is that she is a university professor. She does conduct a course on Krishna consciousness, but in university, most students just undertake the course for the purpose of passing the course. So how do we ensure that they also adopt, absorb in Krishna consciousness mode?
I would say the most important thing is that it has to be, we have to evaluate their level of consciousness. We have to know them individually. And of course, in the modern environment, sometimes there'll be 40 students in the class, and it's a ridiculous situation. So some ways, all you can do is just broadcast it, and you can't really, be sure that it's going to happen. But you try to get feedback, ask questions from individuals, look at the papers, and try to find those people and understand what their level is. In some cases, all they can appreciate is good food and good music. So you introduce that in different ways, and other people are on different levels. So I would say that's the most important thing, is trying to set some personal rapport with people. Okay.
Thank you. The next question, Maharaj, is that under the context of goal of education, what major projects should be adopted by ISKCON Ministry of Education to minimize the dichotomy between the needs of an individual devotee and those of ISKCON as an institution?
These are, very, very broad questions. We'd have to know, again, more details like that. I think what Tapa Mishra is doing is promoting studying of books. The basic process is Harinama. So the Ministry of Education should be promoting, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And then along with that, naturally, then comes reading books, and then after that, all the rest of the aspects in terms of, Varna Ashram and organizing Ratha Yatras, which involves so many people, different festivals, building temples, and like we're going into psychology, so many different aspects. But the ministry should itself not forget that somehow or other promoting the chanting of Hare Krishna. And then Prabhupada is saying, if you can't do that, then read my books, study them, discuss them. So I think that's the basic project. And then after that, it depends upon local environment, local community, and local details. Therefore, administratively, we need regional representatives, a good system to go into the movement, the regional representatives.
Thank you, Maharaj. I also encourage Karunanidhi Prabhu to please be in touch with Maharaj offline as well, and probably have a more elaborate discussion. This question actually deserves a complete symposium to itself, and that's what we are doing. The whole idea is to churn this idea of what education should be. I'm very, very grateful, Maharaj, for your time, despite your busy schedule, and I know you have to enter very much into the next service. So Sankirtan, devotees, is the goal of education. All our efforts must take us to that point, as we understood from Maharaj, and also allow us individually to progress in our consciousness towards Krishna Prema, and institutionally structure ourselves that all guns point to that target.